Good evening. I'd like to call the May 16th, 2021 meeting of the Peoria Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Welcome, everybody. To begin, I'd like to read an opening statement that's read at every meeting. The Planning and Zoning Commission is composed of Peoria citizens who have been appointed by the City Council to serve on the commission as a civic responsibility without compensation. Our duty is to study and review planning and zoning issues within the City of Peoria. The Commission holds public hearings or may conduct a study session on a topic if necessary. Decisions made by the Commission on a general plan amendments, rezoning, or text amendments are forwarded as written recommendations to City Council. The City Council will consider the recommendation of the Commission and make the final determination. The City Council may concur with the decision, modify it, overturn it, or remand it back to the Commission for further consideration. For conditional use permits, the Planning and Zoning Commission will act as the determining body and may approve, deny, or continue the application. Any member of the public may appeal the decision of the Commission to the City Council regarding a conditional use permit. The appeal must be submitted in writing to the Planning and Community Development Department within 15 calendar days of the date of the Commission's decision. In Arizona, as Arizona and Peoria continue to be impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, tonight's meeting is being conducted using measures to protect the health and safety of the public while discussions, deliberations, actions of the Planning and Zoning Commission remain transparent. To ensure the health and safety of those attending tonight's meeting, members of the public are required to wear facial coverings and social distance while inside the council chambers. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting remotely can do so by viewing a live stream broadcast on Facebook at facebook.com/City of Peoria AZ, as well as on Digital Peoria channel on YouTube. The meeting is also broadcast on Cox Channel 11 and CenturyLink Channel 8509. Additionally, the posted agenda online invites citizens with comments or questions on any agenda item to submit those by 6 p.m. in advance of the meeting. If you have comments or questions following tonight's meeting, you can submit those to the Planning Department by emailing planning@peoriaaz.gov. In addition, in the interest of maintaining a fair and efficient hearing, the Commission will adhere to the following steps during tonight's meeting. Each case will be called in the order of which it appears on the agenda unless otherwise announced. Chair will open the case. City staff will then present a brief staff report and recommendation. The applicant is then invited to give a presentation if desired. Then the chair will read the submitted testimony provided by the public in advance of the meeting. After all testimony has been taken, we will invite the applicant back up to provide any rebuttal or final statements. Finally, we will have commission discussion and a vote for final decision. At the conclusion, and that concludes our opening statement. Let's begin tonight with a roll call. Commissioners, please indicate your presence after I call your name. Chair Clay Alsop is absent. Secretary Linda Grice.
Present.
Commissioner Sean Hutchinson.
Present.
Commissioner Jeff Nelson.
Present.
Commissioner Brad Schaefer.
Present.
Commissioner Josephine Waitman.
Present.
And Vice Chair is present. This is the final call for any speaker request forms. If you would like to address the Commission tonight, please fill out a speaker request form. We have them available just outside the entrance to the chambers and up front at the podium. None? Okay. Next up will be the consent agenda. The consent agenda is for items that are routine in nature and will be enacted by one motion. There are 3 items on tonight's consent agenda. 1C, disposition of absence. 2C, minutes from the April 15th, 2021 meeting, and 3C, Salad and Go's conditional use permit CU 21-03. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments on any of the consent items before us? Would I entertain a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Mr. Vice Chair, I will second that motion.
Commissioners, please vote. And the motion passes unanimously. Now we move to the regular agenda. We have 2 items before us tonight. The first item, under unfinished business, 4R, Mobile Food Vendor Text Amendment, City-Initiated Text Amendment, TA 20-02. Discussion and possible action on case TA 20-02 to consider a city-initiated text amendment to sections 21-202, definitions, 21-503, land use matrix, and 21-505, limitations on uses of zoning ordinance updating regulations pertaining to mobile food vendors, food and merchandise. Staff, would you like to please present your report?
Members of the commission, this is our 3rd time before you now with this, so I know that y'all are quite familiar with it. But you know, for purposes of you know, the audience at home or audience with us this evening, I may seem a little redundant on some of this information, but I think that a little bit of the background is still applicable in this item, and certainly for those folks that might be joining us for the very first time. This is a application by the city of Peoria to initiate a code amendment related to mobile food vendors. More specifically, we are looking at amending sections 21-202, the definition section, 21-503, the land use matrix for the ordinance, and finally, 21-505, which is the limitation on those uses and how it's applied on site. You know, essentially the purpose of this amendment was to not only comply with state regulations that had recently been passed in 2018, but more specifically to establish really a general set of regulations, you know, for the food vendor use, that not only balance the needs of, you know, brick and mortar establishments, but also, you know, recognizing the needs of the food vendor industry themselves. With respect to current City of Peoria requirements, there really are only 2 requirements there, and that is a City of Peoria business license and the approval of a temporary use permit. Now, we had talked about the temporary use permit, you know, in the previous meetings. You know, not only is it, you know, reserved for a 30-day maximum that's renewed 3 times a year, but we also looked at, you know, current examples in the city of where the TUP is appropriate. And if you recall, we talked about Christmas tree lots, the fireworks stands, the pumpkin trees, or I'm sorry, the pumpkin patches, and, you know, Valentine's Day, the flower arrangements out in the parking lots. So when you think about the, you know, the intricacies of the operational aspects of a food truck, it really wasn't applicable. Then with the help of House Bill 2371, which was approved in May of 2018, it really established a set of statewide health and safety standards for mobile food operators. You know, and in that it set, you know, some do's and don'ts, but more specifically, it really defined what the food vendor was and also what the mobile food vendor was. So using that as a backdrop, we started to craft our the ordinance that you have before you this evening. And as I stated, we're essentially amending 3 sections of the ordinance. The definitions, the land use matrix, and the limitations on the uses. It's really kind of the who, where, and how of the ordinance that we're really getting into. With respect to the definitions, a mobile food unit, you know, is a food establishment that's licensed by the state of Arizona, that is readily movable, dispenses food and beverages for immediate service and consumption, and other incidental retail items from any vehicle. The mobile food vendor, more specifically, was any person who owns or controls, manages or leases the vehicle in which the services are being provided. Additionally, the mobile merchandise vendor, which, essentially would be other types of sales other than food, was defined, as well as the mobile merchandise unit itself. With respect to the land use matrix, you can see that's outlined in red. It updates the current table with the definition. Also updates the table with the merchandise unit as an accessory use, and it indicates where it fits into the land use matrix table. With respect to limitations on uses, it's really broken down into locational requirements and operational requirements. And with respect to the locational requirements, the provisions are outlined as, with respect to authorization, requiring written authorization or an authorized agent for the owner of the specific site. It can be located on sites with a surplus of parking, so it's not taking up necessary parking and reducing those. With respect to setback, it's prohibited within 250 feet of any single-family use. It must be located on a dust-proof surface. And more specifically, and really very importantly, it can't interfere with pedestrian access ways, fire lines, driveways, traffic circulation, or any traffic visibility at driveways or street intersections. And finally, with respect to terminating the day's business, the site must be restored to its original condition. Permanent alterations to the site, for that specific user are prohibited. Taking a look at operation requirements, the daily hours was a topic of generous discussion, and what we bring to you this evening is that they can't operate the same site or center for a maximum of 8 consecutive hours. This period includes setup, serving, and takedown. Okay? Unless a TUP has been issued, meaning they've gone through the process of the TUP process, which we identified earlier, operation is prohibited between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. unless acting as an auxiliary kitchen for an adjacent bar, tavern, or restaurant, in which case it's then limited to the hours of the primary establishment. So what does that mean? It means that, we have several local pubs in the area. They may choose to bring a food truck in, say, from midnight to 2 a.m. Under this code, it would allow that to be permitted as long as it continued to operate, within the original hours of the principally permitted use that was bringing it in. So if they close at 2 a.m., they're closed at 2 a.m. and they would be leaving the site as well. Excuse me. With respect to restrooms, mobile or temporary restrooms are strictly prohibited on site. Cannot bring them in to, service the customers that are coming in. And as is, adequate lighting is required. It needs to be directed downward, shielded so you cannot see the light source from adjacent properties. Talking about the public outreach a little bit, we sent direct emails to interested party list. We continuously were updating our website, and not only from a social media aspect, but economic development newsletters as well. We had a stakeholder open house on February 23rd, 2021. It was an online meeting. Really good discussion. We had one member of the food truck, a food truck owner at the site. We had the Chamber of Commerce there, as well as the Associated City staff that had been collaborating on this from day one. There was no question that the food truck operator was overall support for the effort. He had suggested an additional hour in our original hours of operation, and we've actually expanded that an additional hour that we feel is fair. Excuse me. And there was generous discussion regarding the service windows facing the street, which we had brought before this body before and talked about that as well. It is one of the slight revisions that we have within the code in that, getting a little more specific with respect to safety, and not being able, the reluctance to provide any obstructions in specific areas on site. We've softened our approach on the service window aspect. Legal ad was published in the newspaper. We've had several public meetings on this, 2 planning commission study sessions. Director Hawkes provided a city council project update last week. We were originally scheduled 2 weeks ago to come before you with this item. On April 15th, we received some additional feedback from industry stakeholders and asked for a continuance to this meeting so we could really address their comments and concerns that they had brought to us. We updated the code to clarify and justify certain provisions. We thought some of the suggestions that they had brought to us were, really made good common sense. We revised the code, we distributed it to stakeholders for review, and we are confident that the changes appropriately address the concerns. More specifically, they create more of a tailored a code that is easily applicable across the board and really simple to understand. Some of the key findings in looking at this evening, it complies with the Arizona Revised Statutes, House Bill 2371 that was approved in May of 2018. It really provides for an enhanced clarity and uniformity in regulating this business. And finally, it provides proper protections for existing business that are out there and adjacent residents as well. So having said that, Chairman Fider, members of the commission, we recommend approval of case TA 2002 to the June 1st, 2021 City Council meeting as outlined in your staff report this evening. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. Myself, Chris, Lori, we're here to answer any questions you might have, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Do any other commissioners have any questions of staff? I don't have the fortune of the little screen that the regular chairman has, so if you just want to raise your hand if you got something to say. Commissioner Schaefer.
Thank you, Chair. Great presentation, Mr. Williams. Few quick questions. The outreach in regards to stakeholders, did stakeholders include brick and mortar food owners as well?
Yeah, I think that was through the Chamber of Commerce.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Schaefer, we did it through a couple different ways. As we've kind of talked about through study session, members of staff went through the council subcommittee on codes. Those have 2 council members that provided feedback. They had in particular received comments from brick and mortar stores at that location, and so that was their concern to provide that balance within the community and when we were formulating the regulations. Secondly, the interested stakeholder list was open to all, and that was available through the website. So when we did the social media and the newsletter information as well to the Economic Development Department, that reached out to all facets of the business community within Peoria. And in particular, we made sure that we reached out to the food truck industry representatives, which is why you've seen kind of an evolution of changes before you this evening. So all along the way, we've provided touch points with various members of the community to build the ordinance, to build the text amendment as you see it this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Stever. It definitely sounds like you did your due diligence. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Nelson?
Thank you. So just for clarification, was the one change that we were told about today, changing that word allows to include, was that the only change resulting from the April 15th feedback we got from the food truck folks?
Chairman Pfeiffer, Commissioner Nelson, no, sir. There were several other subtle changes, and I'm going to
If you could, yeah.
I'm going to
tell me more
back up
about
here
those. I'd love
just a
to-
little bit, and we're going to go to, probably, sir, the two biggest changes that we noted in the ordinance are right here before you. As I said, we were recommending 6 hours prior to, in our first two study sessions when we had came through, and we eventually ended up coming to the conclusion that 8 hours was actually much more feasible with respect to, capturing the majority of a dinner crowd or parts of a lunch crowd and a dinner crowd. Probably the second biggest change on this is the ability to remain after 10 p.m., in an accessory type environment, or providing an accessory type, what's the word I'm looking for?
Okay, I didn't realize that.
Event.
Yeah.
And then a couple of other little changes as well. Owner authorization was always a part of the original
Right.
ordinance, and then we also added the owner authorized agent as well, which is very consistent with our other applications within the city. So those are probably the three biggest changes that you would see on this, and then a couple of other little words like, that you see in your memo this evening. So,
Okay, so I thank you for clarifying that. I
yeah,
didn't realize
very,
that came out of this.
noticeable changes, but still subtle, that really, I think, kind of solidified the seamlessness through the ordinance. It's very easy to read. It's very easy, I think, to comprehend. Yet it's very, very crystal clear on what the requirements are.
Did the chamber take an official position on this one way or another? Did they endorse it? Or were they just at the hearing just to hear what we had to say and really didn't take a position?
Chairman Feider, members of the commission, the chamber did provide some input to the city, and they had received some concerns from some of the stakeholders from the food truck industry, and so that was partly the basis for asking for a continuance so that we could work through some of those changes. And so the changes that Rick has highlighted this evening were some of the principal changes that the industry representatives that had concerns had asked for. So just noting that the initial 6-hour period of time, which seemed to those representatives to be a little tight, particularly when you consider trying to maybe make a breakfast and lunch or lunch and dinner and include setup and takedown. They thought that was a little tight, and they asked for that to be expanded a little bit. And then, as Rick indicated also, we've, during the COVID period and perhaps beyond, there are certain situations where, a bar or tavern might utilize a food truck for auxiliary service.
So that feedback came through the chamber from the,
Well, the chamber had illuminated that, those concerns, but also we also had an industry representative that contacted us as well to talk through that.
interesting. One final question is, can you speak to the enforcement part of this? I don't know if I may have missed it, but is this a complaint-driven enforcement amendment? Or, tell me how that works.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Nelson, yes. If there is a concern with the food truck and how it is operated, the code enforcement does operate on a complaint basis, so they would be called out. First and foremost, we always take the approach of an educational assessment, and we provide them information. Part of it, as we go forward, we are intending to do a handout with the new requirements and do some education. But if we do receive a complaint, that's the first and foremost, to have that conversation with the operator. If it's on a continuous basis, then we can take action that would be allowed at that point in time. But we hope not to get there, because we think these provisions and performance standards are much more compatible with the normal operations that we're seeing within the city.
Thank you. You anticipated my next question was, I was hoping we wouldn't be, punitive on the first a situation we come up on a food vendor who may not be aware of these, and just to educate them. And I'm glad to hear there'll be some collateral produced that could be handed out, I assume by code enforcement?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Nelson, Commissioners, that's a great point. In fact, if the ordinance moves forward, I think that would be an objective of ours, to put some collateral together to put that out to the food truck industry and the business community. And we always look for, as Lori indicated, to inform people of the rules and to seek voluntary compliance first and foremost. And that's really what the vast results that we get is voluntary compliance.
It sounds like you have a great stakeholder list already as part of your feedback process, so that's what goes to. So, all right, that's all I had. Thank you.
Or to further his point, maybe add that collateral when they pick up their temporary use permit. Be another option. So, Mr. Williams, I have one other question. In the scenario where you said the mobile vendors could be an ancillary use to the user that occupies the real estate, I assume that with these extended hours, the mobile vendors would still have to honor like setbacks, noise levels, light, all the regular zoning requirements that the existing use is required to honor?
Chairman Fider, commission members, that is absolutely correct. All the provisions within the ordinance would still be applicable.
Okay, anyone else? Ms. Waitman?
Thank you, Chairman. So I have a question. I think it was mentioned that the 8 hours were more feasible. So the industry representative, was this 6 to 8 hour change recommended by them?
Commissioner Fider, or I should say Chair Fider, members of the commission, that is correct. I mean, this representative did ask and make the point that 8 hours just was a lot more feasible.
Okay. So just to clarify, one of the biggest changes that I see is definitely the time. So this will still give them 6 working hours, but we were giving them the, I guess, the privilege to use 2 hours to set up, right? One up front, one behind, so that they would have 6 hours of business so that they can catch that crowd and really monetize off their time of being there.
Yep, Chairman Fider, members of the commission, yes, that 8 hour period is inclusive of setup and takedown and then operations in the middle. That's right.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Waitman. I'd like to open the public hearing of this, on this case. This is city-initiated text amendment, so the city is the applicant, so we'll go to any comments from the public. Have we received any written requests to speak or questions?
No, we have not, sir.
Okay. I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, any further questions before requesting a motion? Okay, may I have a motion on case TA 20-02?
Chair, I move that the commission recommend text amendment TA 20-02 to City Council for approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Rice. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Commissioners vote? And it passes unanimously. Thank you. Next item under new business, 5R, study session, 2021 Major General Plan Amendment Cycle. Staff briefing and possible discussion regarding the 2021 Major General Plan Amendment Cycle and timing of the amendments moving forward. This item is for discussion only. No actions will be taken this evening. Staff, please present.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I am back before you, along with my illustrious cohorts in crime, if you will, to talk once more about the general plan. So for those that have been with us for a number of conversations, and for those joining us online for the first time, we are going to be introducing as a preview coming attractions, if you will, for the later part of the year. So first, let's get into some general plan key facts before I talk about what is a general plan. And these are kind of some of the fun ones for Arizona in particular, and some of these are nuances as to why we do what we do. First one is a general plan is a comprehensive document. It's the foundational document. Basically, the majority of Arizona has had a general plan, and in particular Peoria has had a general plan in place since the 1970s. We had two Growing Smarter and Growing Smarter Plus legislative efforts, which kind of tailors the requirements of what we do when we process general plan amendments, and in particular, major general plan amendments. We believe we are the last state that requires voter ratification for our general plans. And what does that mean? The voters get to say if it works or if it doesn't, and if it doesn't, then we have the wonderful pleasure of redoing it again and to make sure we get it right. To date, knock on wood, we have not had that issue. General plans are considered living documents, and that's going to be important as to why we're here this evening. And I did touch on it briefly. You can make adjustments to that document to adjust for trends, economic conditions, and things of that nature. And they fall into two categories. It's either a major amendment or it's a minor amendment, and that has an impact on how we process those amendments. A couple other things to keep in mind. The number of topics or items that we touch on within that general plan is actually based on the population. For the city of Peoria, 17 topics are required. We actually have 22 because we have added quality of life topics within there. So it's not only circulation, land use, economic development, and so forth. You know, we're talking about we're talking smart growth, the healthy community initiatives in there, so, you know, healthy design. We've got arts and culture. All of those components create the quality of life, and so we thought those were important, hence 22 topics, not just 17. And finally, there's something called the 60-day review, and that ensures all agencies and anyone else looking to do that has the ability for 60 days to take a look at the major amendments going forward. So for those who have not heard my spiel, primarily those online, we always want to do a little bit of education. What is a general plan? And there's a couple things as to why we do and have that education, if you will. It is the foundation or the framework. If you look at the graphic to the left, it is the building blocks in which we take all development from. So the general plan is the starting. It sets the land use. We look out 10 to 20 years and beyond. It's the vision for the city. As we go forward in the development process, we build upon the goals and the policies within that plan. So some common misconceptions that continue today. People often confuse the general plan as the zoning ordinance. The general plan covers larger than a particular parcel. It can cover a vast area for a land use category. A specific zoning is tied to a particular parcel. And when you do general plan amendments, and in particular major ones for sure, there are a number of public hearings that you go through in order to make that change. Because when we make an amendment to the general plan, we are making sure that it is compatible with the vision, the intent of what the voters approved within the document. So I have dusted this one off. Chris affectionately calls it the mothership graphic, but it is important for the conversation this evening. From the general plan, all things happen, and people often don't associate the general plan with what they see on a daily basis. So if I may, from the general plan, we had the 6 themes that we had talked about. From those 6 themes, those set goals and policies, and from those goals and policies, then we actually have master plan and implementation tools such as the zoning ordinance that we're talking about tonight through code changes, design review manual. We also have the sustainability action plan, things of that nature. Our economic development strategies are a master plan, and they feed off the goals and policies within the general plan. So from all things that you would see on a daily basis to how we operate, superior public services, if you will, that stems for what we are trying to achieve within the general plan. So some things to remember for major plan amendments. They are heavily regulated by Arizona revised statutes. Major amendments are subject to an annual process. So what does that mean? Those amendments need to be considered within the same calendar year. If not, they have to wait for another year in order to come before for consideration. Either a private entity, or as we are going to talk about this evening, the city may initiate a major general plan amendment. Once you do, those have enhanced notification requirements, including participation and adoption requirements. For example, the 60-day review, which we transmit the entire amount of the general plan document, the changes, to a long list of acronyms of agencies throughout the community. It could be our partners from state land, it could be Maricopa County, it could be the neighboring jurisdictions, Surprise, Phoenix, Glendale, and so forth, Surprise. So it is a comprehensive list. It is definitely an effective tool. They have 60 days to comment. In particular, we would normally hear from Luke Air Force Base and other cities in terms of, providing comment. The other key item that also impacts the commission is there are 2 commission meetings, and one is a remote location. So you always have to have the first one off-site. It is basically an informational meeting, no recommendation is taken, and then you come back for the second commission meeting, and then that's where we ask you to make a recommendation on those major general plan amendments. So recent history. As I noted a little bit prior to that, we've been before commission a little bit on the general plan, so to speak. So just kind of setting the stage as to how we got here and why. So 2018, we basically prepped for the comprehensive update that we did in 2019. I unfortunately remember the number of hours that we spent going mile by mile in the city to make the land use map as accurate as possible based on the existing GIS information that we had. So that was the preview, and that was what we accomplished in 2018. I know you guys are not as excited as I am about that, but that was an important step. 2019, that was the comprehensive rewrite. We introduced new land use categories. We basically created a more informational kind of nature regarding those land use categories, the character. We spent a lot more time having that conversation within the document. And we created the 6 themes aligned with the council livability objectives. We also had some collisions of opportunity, and we partnered with some of our agencies to reposition some of their parcels, if you will. We also worked with some private landowners to reposition those parcels. So how did that kind of impact? Well, you've already seen Camino Al Lago coming in with the multifamily component, because one of those changes that we actually worked on was changing the Camino Al Lago marketplace into a mixed-use development. That created the opportunity for them to come back and make that change on the rezoning case. So looking ahead, we went to 2020. We had some small refinements to the land use plan because those stakeholders, some of those stakeholder conversations didn't quite make the 2019. It rolled over to 2020. So we took care of that. City Council placed it on the ballot in May, and I am very appreciative that in November of 2020, we passed with 67% of the vote. So we have an approved general plan. It's been ratified by the voters. Why would we go and change it? That's the biggest question that we always get. Again, it's a living document, and that's why we kind of point that out to begin with. And so I'm going to pass it over again to my cohort in crime to explain why in 2021, why we are refining what we just passed by voters.
So luckily, Lori was able to take the boring part for me, and I'm able to talk about the exciting changes that we're doing to the general plan. As she had referenced, we've been working on this quite literally for years. We had kind of done some groundwork in 2017, 2018, we did the map changes, and we've continued to ensure that it is that living document that represents the community as we go forward. So with that in mind, we are, and looking back at Chris's mothership slide, our various departments are always evaluating what do they need to update, what do they need to change in order to implement the goals and policies of the general plan. They do that by updating their various master plans, by implementing strategies and various policies so that they can carry out that citizen-led vision that's identified within the general plan. Just due to timing of how some of those things line up, the master plans that were evolving through our various partner departments were in different stages at the time that we were working on the past major general plan amendments. So as a result, we do have an opportunity now to integrate some of those elements or updates that have been identified in those more specific plans within this major general plan amendment. So we're always trying to make sure that all of our focus and policy and vision align throughout all the various departments within the city. So to kind of get to the meat of it, a lot of what we're doing is that alignment. We're also identifying areas that could use refinement within what was conducted previously that perhaps isn't associated with some of those master plans. So for instance, providing a glossary of terms so that it's a little bit easier for folks that perhaps aren't familiar with technical information or terms. They have a resource to go to. Identifying a formula for density. It's a very common thing, but it's also just good to have and represent within the plan. We're also looking at possible map modifications so that we can, as Lori had referenced, make sure that we're aligning with the highest and best use of the land, and in particular, working with some of those partner agencies like the State Land Department, if there are opportunities to position a property so that it can more easily move forward through the entitlement process, then we would evaluate those within this time frame. Similar to what Lori had referenced, we would use very similar outreach opportunities. So the City Office of Communication has a very regular and steady presence online that we would seek to utilize in order to get information out to the public. We would also use the more classic outreach components such as the stakeholder list that was referenced, and of course compliance with the statutory requirements with respect to the 60-day review period. And that notification list for that 60-day review period is quite extensive. I think it's something like 80 individuals from about 20 or 30 different agencies. So it's quite the mailing list that we end up sending out to. We would also, again, comply with the requirements for the public meetings, but also seek, any sort of input at those meetings for refinement of what we are proposing. Because again, this is a living document and we're looking to incorporate the vision, not just of city staff, but of the actual citizens within the community. So here we have a little bit of a timeline for you. We've identified the dates that we know we have to hit, and then some tentative dates in there in particular for the open houses, just depending on where we're able to locate those and schedule them for the ability for the public to attend. I'm not sure, depending on what the circumstances of the world are at that time, if we end up holding a virtual public meeting or open house, I'm sorry, or if it'll be in person. Our hope and our intention is to have in person, because I think it's a great opportunity to engage with the citizens, but that's just my hope. So. We would be taking this to City Council on the last council date of the year. Again, as Lori referenced, we do have to have the general plan major amendment occur within a one-year time horizon. So making sure that we hit that is what we have before you on that schedule. With that, we'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gleason, Ms. Deaver. Any commissioners have any questions or comments? Commissioner Nelson?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a real quick one. Will commissioners have the opportunity to attend the open houses?
Certainly. We would actually keep you guys regularly apprised of any updates or changes to the schedule and let you know when those open houses would occur and where they're occurring.
Excellent, thank you.
Commissioner Schaefer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Gleason for that overview. Quick question. So these amendments or proposals would be on the ballot for 2022, is that correct?
So one distinction from what occurred in 2020 with, as it relates to the 2021 amendment that we would be taking forward, in 2020, that was a component of state statute that requires us to take it to the ballot once every 10 years. So we've achieved that requirement, and very thankfully with, 67% may not seem like a lot, but in terms of voting in a very political year, I'm very proud of the percentage that we were able to hit as far as approval rating on that. So we've met that metric, and we wouldn't need to do it until that 10-year period is elapsed again.
Anyone else? Okay, do we have any members of the public that would like to speak? No? Okay. There's no action to be taken tonight, so staff, thank you. Next item on the agenda is call the public for non-agenda items. Do we have any speaker requests? No? Any reports from staff?
Mr. Chair and members of the commission, I'd like to introduce, we had a grand opening last week, so if you haven't heard of Pop-Up Peoria, you might want to take advantage of that. It's located at Park West. It occupies a suite within Park West, and so what Pop-Up Peoria is, this is a public-private collaboration between the city and the Park West shopping mall there. And what that use is, it allows for some retail space and some community space. So it was a collaborative effort. In that regard, the city engaged into a partnership with the ASU's Orrin Edison Entrepreneurship and Innovation Institute, and also the Grand Shop. So the Grand Shop is located over here in Old Town. They're a retail store. They host a collection of Peoria artisans and entrepreneurs. So the retail spot occupies the front half of that storefront, and the Grand Shop out of Old Town, they staff, manage, and operate the retail portion of that. The back portion, which is really the community portion, that's a collaboration between the city and ASU. And what we'll offer on-site programming that'll be scheduled, and you can go to the city's website to see what that programming is. But some of the items that they've identified on that scheduling is things like sustainability classes, library story times, code compliance workshops, neighborhood watch meetings, as well as a makerspace. So you'll have the retail component and the community space. The Pop-Up Peoria is open 7 days a week. They open, I believe, at 10 a.m., and their hours are open till 7 p.m. during the week, and I believe on the weekends they go till 9 or 10 p.m. at night. So I just encourage everybody to check that space out. And then, with that, I think our next meeting, it looks like we don't have any items for the May 20th. So we'll see you back on June 3rd, and that's all we have for tonight.
Great, thank you, Mr. Hawkes. Do any commissioners have any other items to report, issues to talk about? Okay, seeing no further business, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.